Hello and welcome to Grouchy Old Geeks, episode 46. My name's Steve, my co-host is Scott.
Hello.
This episode we've got a very special guest. He's the co-host of Geek Syndicate. It's Barry Nugent.
Hey! I guess that means you couldn't get Dave when you said co-host of Geek Syndicate.
Yeah.
We couldn't afford him.
No.
Yeah, you can.
These actors with their wages, you know, they want so much. And his rider was ridiculous. So
yeah.
He
was asking for pineapples again, wasn't he? He always does that.
That and lilt, you know.
Oh. You know, without context, that joke is going to be taken completely the wrong way. Yeah. You'll be getting emails. I know. That's what I'm saying.
Good. Make a change.
Oh, we've gone to considerable efforts, Barry, to make it impossible for anybody to get in contact with us.
Yeah, no one knows how to find us or where to email us. But anyway, so last episode we talked a little bit about Picard, and it was halfway through this season. What we thought we'd do this month is, now that the whole of the show has finished, we're going to talk about it as a whole. And we've got Barry on to help us talk about it because he really enjoyed the show too. So, if you have not seen Star Trek Picard, here's your warning now. There will be spoilers. We're going to spoil it as much or as little as we want. And you have been warned. So, go away, come back and watch it, and then come back and listen to the rest of this. Okay.
So since we've talked about it before, Barry, maybe you can just kind of tell us how you felt about it as a whole. Not like individual episodes, but just what's your impression of it coming away now that you've seen the whole season?
I have to say it is my second. Actually, no, I won't talk about the other show. It's one of my favourite shows of 2020, and probably one of my favourite shows of the last few years. I just really enjoyed it, and for me, I even had a little ritual around it where I was getting up early every Friday morning with a cup of tea, just with a throw over me, sitting downstairs and watching it and really looking forward to it. I'm genuinely quite upset that I haven't got that to do this week. Mm-hmm. I think I've said this to you guys before. One of the things that I really loved about the show, and we can get into it, is that I didn't realise how clever it was in terms of Patrick Stewart's performance in it. And I didn't realise it until I got to the latter half of the series. Because certainly in the first couple of episodes, I was enjoying it. I was really enjoying it. But I kind of felt like, he seems like he's really struggling with stuff. You know, just his performance seemed really like he was really old. And I was kind of like, I don't know about this. We'll see how this goes. And then what I started to realise was that was all intentional.
Yeah.
And that in many ways, this was, you couldn't even call it an origin story. It's almost like a re-origin story for Picard. And I keep comparing him to King Theoden from Lord of the Rings, in that he starts off as this kind of, basically he's done. He's just marking time. And it's about him finding himself again, finding his love for space, for Starfleet, for adventure, for making a difference. And by doing so, he's able to kind of bring Starfleet along, or bring the Federation along with him, because by the end, even though you don't necessarily see it physically, the Federation kind of almost goes back a little bit to what it was before, as we would have known it from Next Gen.
Yeah.
I thought it was brilliant. I thought his performance was brilliant. I thought the way they used the other cast members from other shows, like 7 of 9, Hugh.
Yep.
Yeah.
Riker and Troy, I thought were really well done. And although online you can hear lots of people sort of going, oh, where was Geordie, where was Worf, and stuff like that. And obviously also the way they use data, I think, as the core, I think was really cool. But I think I quite liked that they didn't have every single character from Star Trek in there. That they cherry picked who they had, and I think when you got that episode with Troy and Riker, the fact that they dedicated an entire episode to effectively just them at a house having dinner and having conversations, and there was no massive space battles or anything like that, and yet that was probably my favorite episode of the whole series. Just goes to show how well they knew the characters. So in short, I absolutely loved it. I had a couple of issues with the last 3 episodes, but we can get into that.
Okay.
Cool. Yeah, brilliant summary.
Scott, now that we've seen the whole thing, did you like it more or less than we talked last time?
So it only grew in my estimation, and to go back to something that Barry said, to me, I think it was one of the best performances I've ever seen of somebody being an old man, in the sense that I was completely taken hook, line, and sinker. Like when I watched the beginning of the first episode, my reaction wasn't, "Oh, he's playing old really well." My reaction was, "Wow, he's aged really badly. This is going to be excruciating to watch for 10 episodes." And the thing that made me realise that he was acting and he was doing such a brilliant job acting, it wasn't. You're absolutely right, Barry. Over the course of the 10 episodes, he kind of grew into the person that he used to be. But for me, it was in that very first episode when he was this old man and he got basically hoodwinked into doing this interview, and the interview was designed to entrap him. And his going back to what you were saying, Barry, about King Theoden from Lord of the Rings, the flawless transformation for him being a doddery old man who'd kind of given up on life, to him suddenly being painted into a corner that he had to push back on. I thought that transformation was absolutely flawless. Like, I know nothing about acting, but I think it was one of the best pieces of acting I've ever seen, because I was completely convinced by him. And I just thought it was brilliant. And like you say, out of all the episodes, the episode with Troy and Riker was just perfect.
Yeah, it was.
Sorry, Karen.
That was episode 7, the Penfee.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things, it's a payoff. Sometimes when you do a sequel to things, well, most of the time when you do sequels to things, they're never as good, or they diminish the thing that came before. And I think we've said this before, Scott, there are a few exceptions to the rule. One perhaps being Blade Runner and Blade Runner 2049. The rest, you kind of like, do they really have to do another one, or they're just milking it, or now you've changed things, I don't know how to look at the earlier stuff now because of what you've introduced. Whereas this was a natural evolution, but also continuation. The fact that when they have the conversations, there's all these shorthands and things, and he says, thanks for not trying to talk me out of it. I know better, and this kind of thing. It's like, because they've known each other for the best part of 30 years or more, 40 years by this point, and he knows not to do it. And that episode was probably my favourite out of the whole season, I would say, out of the 10.
And also as well, I think, I know we're now diving into an episode, but also the thing I loved about the episode is, obviously, throughout Next Generation and throughout the films, yes, there's a close relationship between the three of them, but they are still within Starfleet, so there is still a chain of command. He's still the captain, they're still his subordinates, and what I loved about this is that was all gone, and even them just calling him Jean-Luc made a big difference, and not captain, even though there was a bit of that. But yet there was still that chain of command, but it was underlined with this, like you say, 30-year friendship. And there's a scene, and it's just a couple of scenes, like you say. There's a scene where Troy hugs him, and then sort of hugs him again, and he's kind of like, I'm okay. And clearly she knows that he's got an illness, because she's an empath and stuff like that. But what I love, and I'm coming at it from a writer's perspective, what I loved about that episode is, and I've heard people argue against this about this series, and I kind of disagree with that this was a perfect example of showing and not telling. And that if you know Troy, you know the character, you know what her background is, so she would know.
Yeah.
And there was no big reveal. And in the same vein, when Baraka's having a conversation with him, and he's kind of like, I don't really want to go into what's going on. And he literally does a whole Sherlock Holmes and just basically just goes through, well, you're doing this, so that means this happens. That means it's probably the Romulans. That means it's probably this. And he just breaks it all down. And again, he's been his first officer for I don't even know how many years. And they just know each other that well. And again, I thought it was just a great example of showing and not telling. The fact that their dinner scene is effectively their ready room, and there's a bit where Picard says options, and then they go around the table of like what they can do and stuff. It's it for me, that episode was just it was flawless.
And for once, I actually liked. Normally, children in shows annoy the crap out of me because they can't act or they're just smug or awful. But honestly, me and Pete have done so many films where we've gone, it was a great film apart from the child, they fucking ruined it. But in this one, the actress who played their daughter, Kestra, was it Kestra?
Yeah.
She was brilliant. She was absolutely charming. She was sweet. She was innocent, but equally she had a little bit of a naughty side to her. You could see some of the inquisitiveness, but she was also very empathic with Soji and the way that she's saying, you haven't got anybody, and neither in he, but you could have. And she says, I don't fully understand what's going on with you, but, I can tell it's something bad. And it's just, she didn't belabor the point. And there again, I think some of the best episodes in this whole series were written by Michael Chabon. And he knows Star Trek inside and out so much that you can feel it when he's been working on a script. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, I thought their daughter was a perfect piece of casting, a piece of casting and piece of writing.
Yeah,
because it absolutely felt like she is exactly the sort of child that Riker and Troy would have had together.
Yeah.
Because there was elements of both of them in her, not just in the looks, but in the way that she acted and just everything. I thought it was an absolutely brilliant piece of casting.
What did we think about the rest of his new crew then? Once he gets out into space, which did take a little bit of time, but they had to set things up. So, what do you think of everybody else on the ship?
I'm sorry, I didn't want to take anyone's thunder. That's why.
We know what Scott thinks of Dr. Agnes Girardi already. So you go ahead before he starts drooling, Barry.
All right. I'd already seen, she was in a show that I really liked called I think it's called The Newsroom.
Yeah, I've seen it. Yeah.
Yeah, she was in that, wasn't she?
Yes.
Yeah, and I thought she was brilliant in that, and I thought she was brilliant in this. I thought everyone was really good. There was a couple of times the Romulan sort of assassin guy.
Yeah, Narek.
A couple of times he came close to being a little bit too naive, just in the way he acted the character. But to be honest, it was fleeting. And I think he worked because everyone else was so kind of damaged in their own way and jaded that I think you need to have someone who was a little bit lighter than everyone else. I really liked I've forgotten the name now.
Raffi.
I was going to say Remy. Raffi. I really liked her. I know a lot of people online were getting really annoyed because she was calling him JL, but it didn't bother me in the slightest. And there was I think it's the episode where they kind of figure everything out. But it played into her strengths because effectively she's a conspiracy. No.
Yeah.
And it's that whole it's the episode where you had the multiple emergency versions of the captain all kind of talking.
Yeah.
But she figures it all out. But a lot of it comes from just her obsession with this conspiracy, which has kind of ruined her life because no one believed her and stuff. And I thought the way they did that was really well, and I really liked her character. I kind of feel the only misstep, personally, for me, that they did was that whole side plot with her going to be with her son that she abandoned, because that to me was just cliche 101 and didn't really do anything to the story. It was just a bit of a blip, really. But other than that, it said I really liked her. I always like the guy who played the captain. Again, I'm rubbish with names.
So, Santiago Cabrera is the actor.
Yes. I like him in anything. I was a massive fan. Yeah.
Heroes. Tons of stuff he's done. Yeah.
I was a massive fan of him in the Heroes. I loved him in this because he was about as close to Star Trek, trying to give you that kind of Han Solo kind of swagger. And I thought, but within the confines of Star Trek, without it feeling like he's just trying to be Han Solo, and he wasn't.
Yeah.
And I really liked some of the conversations him and Picard had. And there's a really brilliant scene where Picard gives this speech about effectively how the Federation have lost their way. It's one of the later episodes, and I thought it was a beautiful scene as well. And then when you kind of find out what his relationship was to his previous captain and what happened, you kind of saw where, why he ended up the way he did, but he's still kind of a Starfleet officer throughout the show, So yeah, I thought he was really good. I didn't mind. I know some people didn't. I didn't really mind the different versions of him as the emergency holograms because it kind of fitted with his personality to a certain extent. And I could see. I like my own company. I don't know if I like my own. Yeah, I would do that. Yeah, no, I would. And it sounds like I'm being up my own ass, but I probably would if I wasn't with Sue and I was on my own. Yeah. And someone said you could create hollow versions yourself, all be slightly different and have different accents. I'd like, yeah, let's crack on with
it. So what about you, Steve? What did you think of them?
I really liked Elnor, who played the Romulan nun, essentially, who's been trained by the nuns to be an excellent killer. And the episode, I'm trying to think of the name of the episode. Is it what's it called? Absolute Candor, that sort of thing, where they have the Romulans talk in a certain way of the people he's been trained by, and they always talk very straightforward. And I like the kind of father-son relationship that he had with Picard, and the fact that he says exactly what he means, but equally he's so good at what he does. And like he says to those first few Romulans who are attacking Picard, he says something like, "Please choose to live," or something like this. Yeah. And then they don't, and he just kills them. It's like, well, what did you do? He said, well, I told them to make a decision, to think about it. They didn't, so that was it. And it's like, oh, okay. And he just slices that guy's head off. It's like, whoa. He was hardcore. I liked. I'm slightly disappointed his fight with Narissa didn't go on a bit longer. Like I really wanted to see him kick her ass as much as I like the actress. Peyton List.
Yeah.
Hello. Legs. Hashtag legs. I wanted I wanted to see him absolutely kick her ass up and down the Borg cube for what she did to Hugh. But sadly we didn't get enough of that, I think. But generally I liked the cast. I think obviously by the end of the show at the end of the season you get to find a lot more about them. You can see they're a lot more rounded. To begin with, they're very spiky, and I wasn't getting on with Raffi, but as it goes on, you see that she's kind of a surrogate mother to everybody, really, and a good friend with Chris Rios, the captain, and it worked, but I wish you'd stop calling him JL. Just stop it. We know who he is. Everybody knows who he is. Just stop it, love. Come on. Just say Captain or Sir or Jean-Luc or Boss, or not JL. Once or twice a show, and that's it. That's all you're allowed. Scott.
See, I looked at that as so. People call me, so most people call me B, or Sue calls me Barry if I've done something wrong. It's a whole Indiana Jones thing where if I'm not listening, she'll go, Barry. So, okay. And then I'll pay attention. It's like, let it go. But Dave is the one who really calls me B, and I kind of let it. Was most people who call me B, I allow it. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas for Dave, it's a 40-year friendship thing. Do you know what I mean? And that's kind of how I saw that, which is why it didn't bother me, because I could kind of put myself in that mindset, in that there's just some people that, and I know and Riker is obviously a closer friend, but it's just how some people choose to sort of relate to each other. So I didn't really have a problem with that within the context of their relationship. But I think, sort of going back to relationship, I think the earlier episodes, what I liked about it, which is why when the Riker episode came, it came at the right time, Riker and Troy episode, in that we had that brilliant first episode where we had that scene with the interview, and it was a brilliant scene. I would compare it almost to that kind of classic Superman Clark Kent scene, the scene everyone talks about, where he takes his glasses off and he kind of stands taller, and then he hasn't. There's no CG. It's just literally body movement and acting, and he transforms himself from Clark Kent. That's how I saw that scene.
Yeah.
So you had that scene, and then literally the next few episodes after that, everyone's basically having a go at him. He goes to Starfleet to try and get a ship. The woman's kind of, Admiral Clancy is like, basically, you can go and do one because you saw your little stunt on TV. We're not having it. Then he goes to Raffi. And I thought the Raffi meeting, was brilliant because it completely turned everything on its head for me. Because because they have the little flashback where he's effectively his second in command or whatever.
Yeah.
And, he decides to be the kind of Picard that we know, and, noble. And he's like, if you don't do this, then I'm out. And they're like, right, well, you're out. And then they sack her as well. But the difference is, obviously, Picard's got a legacy. He's got this vineyard. He's clearly, all right for cash, and he's living life, as we say back in the day. He's living large. Whereas she's living effectively in a caravan, in a space caravan.
Yeah.
Drinking herself to death because she's skint, because her career has been trashed because of the decision he made, not taking in the repercussions it was going to have on other people. And that kind of played out through the first half of the series, where he kept bumping up with people and the repercussions of his actions were coming back on him. And I loved that when it got to the episodes with Riker and Troy, it was like, for me, the first time he actually turned up somewhere and people were just overjoyed to see him. And I feel that was, and the fact it was kind of around the midpoint, or at least over the halfway mark, I thought felt intentional to me, and I liked it. I liked the way they handled that.
Yeah, I thought it was done great.
So what do we think about the story and the plot and the thing revolving around Soji and Data and everything else, Scott? What did you feel about that and the AI and the banning of them and so on?
So I think I put... Before I tell you what I didn't like about it, let me just say I really liked the plot. I thought it was done really well. I like how it moved along. So I'm pretty positive about it. The thing that disappointed me a little bit towards the end is I really liked at the beginning that it was a very personal mission that they were on. So I liked at the start where Picard was basically sitting on the bench with her, and he was basically just leveling with her and saying, "You're the most important thing to the world in me at the moment, and my entire mission is just to make sure you're safe and happy." And I really liked when it was at that level, like it was being done as a very personal mission.
Yeah.
Towards the end, and it's kind of a general annoyance with shows in general nowadays, but the fact that it became this huge, galaxy destroying level threat where he was having to save the universe one more time, I was a little bit disappointed with. Not that it wasn't enjoyable, and it was good and it was well done, but I just liked it when it was actually a lot smaller and a lot more personal. But when it came to the point where he was essentially saving the universe, that felt like it was a little bit too big for the journey that they were on. Yeah. I don't know what you two think about that. I mean, I enjoyed it and it was well done, but I think I enjoyed it more at the beginning when it just felt, actually, this is a lot more individual and personal.
Yeah, Barry, what do you think?
I'm a bit torn. I kind of echo what Scott's saying. I kind of, as much as I did really enjoy the show, I had quite a few issues with the last couple of episodes because it suddenly ramped up, like you say, to this sort of, universe altering thing that was going to happen. But the problem with universe altering things, it tends to actually narrow the plot. Mm-hmm. Because you narrow down your options. There's only so many ways you can go. And to be honest, from the minute, my worry was the minute Soji met with one of the Romulans who called her the Destroyer. You know that bit where they're in the
cube.
And I could literally sit down and plot out how this was going to go. And that she was going to turn out to be the Destroyer, but actually it was going to be that battle of Picard convincing her not to be the Destroyer, to be better than that. I could literally plot that out, and that was kind of how it went. Now, all the stuff around it was really cool, but that central plot from that moment on was for me, very predictable. To the point of they literally showed you. Now, I knew from the beginning when they said, they told Picard he had this disease and, he had weeks, he needs to get out there. But I knew, somehow they would get out of it, And it wasn't just because, and obviously we knew that it got a second season. So I didn't really bother me so much that was going to happen. But the way they kind of literally turned up on the planet and it was like, oh, we're building this synthetic thing. It's not got a mind in it at the moment, but once it's not quite finished yet, but when it's finished, we'll be able to plug a mind into it. I was like, oh, okay, that's how they're going to do it. And again, that didn't bother me until they had this really, and it was done well. They had this really emotional, death scene.
Yeah.
And, I won't lie, I got the old heart. Even though I knew he was going to be okay, just the way they did it, I thought was really good. And had this been a one-off season, and there's a little part of me almost wishes it was. If this had been a one-off season and he had died at the end, I'd probably still be crying now because that scene was done so well.
Yeah.
But the fact that he then goes off, sees that it comes out, and then he wakes up and they've stuck him in this body and they've made all these changes, and they kind of literally sit there answering all the plot holes that people would have been thinking of.
Yeah.
Like, oh, well, surely he's not going to die now. Oh, no, you will die because you've made it so that you can die, and we've stuck you in exactly the same body, and I kind of forgave all of that. But what I really struggled with was you had all these different scenes of his crew dealing with his death.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And to me, it just didn't make sense because surely when he died, the first thing that would have happened was one of the doctors would have just said, shit, we could try putting him in that body, and then go, yeah, try that. And to me, it would have made, not even to have had the death scene, but then for someone to have had that idea, then rushing him over, and then the worry is whether or not it will work rather than what we actually got. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes total sense. And I didn't. So probably for this more than most shows, I haven't looked into the background of it at all and how they went about filming it and all that sort of stuff. I just took it for what it was as I was watching it, and I'm really glad that I did that.
Yeah.
But that scene with him, or that whole end piece with him dying, really, really to me feels like they were 3/4 of the way through filming the last episode, and they come up to him and say, Patrick, we've been looking at some of the early cuts, and this is really quite good. And we were just wondering whether you might be up for doing a second season. And the whole death thing, we've got somebody typing furiously at a typewriter right now, and because it really felt to me like they were definitively going to kill him off. And they decided, I could be totally wrong, but it felt like they decided at the last minute that they were gonna pull him back from the brink, because it was a brilliant death, and it kind of feels like they pulled back, and the fact that he's still alive, the fact that they killed him off and resurrected him, to me cheapens actually a really, really effective and emotional death, which was Commander Data's. And the fact that they had that scene within that simulation or whatever it was, and he was talking about the allure of mortality and it adding meaning to everything, I thought was really brilliantly done, was really emotional. And the fact that Picard died and then a minute later got better, it made that a little bit toothless.
Yeah. So to address both those things, if it was me and I'd been in the writers' room and it was I was Michael Chabon and I got to decide how it would go on, I would have said, rather than do the resurrection thing for all the reasons you've said, which robs it of stuff, what they should have done is said that this condition that he's got, we know that physically he's not as good as he used to be. He's not. One of the concerns I had, and other people had expressed too, was that you're going to have a 70-odd-year-old man running around as an action hero. And in the first episode, they dissuaded you of that thing by showing the fact that when he runs up the stairs, he gets tired and he's out of breath. So he's not an action hero physically, but mentally and commanding, he's still there. He's still a captain. And as the show goes on, he remembers who he used to be and became that person again. And it was never about, particularly with Picard, being physical. He's the diplomat. Of all the captains, he's the one that referred to as a diplomat because he talks his way out of it. He's very good at that kind of thing. So my thought was, if they said his condition is terminal and it's going to be really bad, it's his mental faculties that are going to be affected. And that's the one thing that he's still got left. So almost like the way they did in Logan, where when it was Patrick Stewart again playing Professor X, his mind is going, and the possible repercussions of the damage were catastrophic. Whereas in this, if you said that he just starts like spacing out, or he just starts getting a bit forgetful, and the condition's getting worse, and eventually it will kill him as like a sort of Alzheimer's type thing, then he's losing the one thing that he's still got left that he values above anything else. His body doesn't care about really, it's going to go, but his mind. And I thought, what if instead of killing him, he starts to deteriorate? And we know that he's still going to get a second season, but you know that it's just going to get worse and worse as time goes on. Yeah. And that's more of a like, oh shit, how's he going to cope? How's he going to get through this, even with all these people around him? Whereas this was, as you said, Scott, it was, oh, he's dead. Oh my God. Oh wait, nope, he's back. Yep, there he is. There he is.
His death and him coming back to life was about as. This is going to be a massive spoiler, so I'm not going to. We might want to cut this out, but I was going to say him dying and coming back to life was about as quick as Chewbacca's dying and coming back to life.
No, that's
but
fine.
I think when you look, I suppose the best way, and I've only just thought of this, and then I want to talk about some of the positive about the last 2 episodes. But the best way to look at it is you had Picard's death, and then way back in the day you had Spock's death.
Yeah.
And we've tried to, and Star Trek has tried to do this time and again to sort of, kill off characters, and it's done it with varying levels of success. But effectively with Spock, they kind of did, they killed him off and then they brought him back. The difference was when I saw Star Trek 2, I saw it in the cinema when it came out, Dave, when I went to see it, and then you had that whole sequence with Spock dying.
Yep.
Which I never thought was going to happen. I didn't think he'd die. I thought they'd find some way to sort him out. And then they were burying him. And I was inconsolable because I was like, what the hell? And we left the cinema and it was like, that was it. Mm. And then you had Search for Spock, which was, 2 years later. And the whole episode was Spock wasn't in it until the last 5 minutes. And this was all about just trying to get their friend back and how far they were prepared to go to get him back. And they weren't even, and remember in that film, all of it wasn't about bringing Spock back to life. It was about getting his mind to Vulcan or something like that. I can't remember. Yeah. And then they ended up at the planet, and it ended up obviously that on the planet Spock's body had regenerated. So it was basically luck, that Spock's body had regenerated, and then it was that whole shit. Can we put his mind back in? Well, we can try, but it's never been done before. Okay. And then they try it, and then it basically kind of works, and he's still not Spock. Mm-hmm. And then it's only when we get to, I would say, the last bit of Star Trek 4, and maybe even part of 5, that we kind of get Spock back, to an extent. And he's still kind of referenced. So I thought what they did was brilliant, Whereas in this one, it was like, oh my God, he's dead, he's back.
Yeah.
And my problem wasn't that my problem wasn't the solution. My problem was the way they handled it. My problem wasn't that they plugged his mind into a body. Yeah. Almost like what you said, Steve. Almost if they'd done that, and then maybe it didn't work. But as I said, I just felt that the scenes that they had afterwards with everyone else grieving him, which were really emotive and powerful scenes, especially with like Raffi and Elnor, and he's just again inconsolable. Absolutely he's broken. To have that, and then you've literally got the 2 doctors and Picard. They bring Picard back to life, have a bit of a conversation, and Picard's like, I've got to do something, which is effectively, kill Data, or allow Data to die. And I'm thinking that whole sequence, I'm thinking, has anyone actually bothered to go out to tell everyone who's crying that it's okay, he's not dead?
They've also,
do you know what I mean? Because that's what I was thinking. Because like, where are that? When all this is going on, what are they doing?
Yeah,
do you know? And the fact that we didn't even get, I think what would have helped me is if we'd got a scene with, I don't know, Eleanor and Raphael, and again they're crying inconsolable, and then he kind of looks up and sees him and he's like, what? And then you can almost see him walking out, and then everyone kind of runs to him like, what the hell? That would have, and everyone's kind of hugging him. That would have gone some way, but it just felt really disjointed, that last section to me. And maybe that does lend into what Scott was saying. But yeah, something just felt off with the way that was done.
They've also closed the door on a lot of things. By doing that, he's effectively now not immortal, but he has no physical condition issues. He has no mental issues. Essentially, you've created Picard that's going to live for another 20, 30 years, however long they say naturally live, but he has no problems whatsoever now. So that whole storyline is gone. So it's like, oh, okay then, that's that then. They've just kind of closed it off, and I thought you could have done a lot more with it. But anyway, shall we move on?
Yeah. On the positive, real positive, I think what was brilliant about that final episode, and if you wanted to show the culmination of his arc was the look on Riker's face when he popped up on the screen. When Picard was just being full on Picard, and you could almost see Riker just sitting back like, I don't even know what I'm doing here. You know, he's like, yeah. And even when it's all done and dusted, he's like, yeah, you got this.
I love Riker's speech, where he's just like, I'm acting captain of one of the toughest, fastest, most powerful ships Starfleet has ever produced, and I'm sat in front of a lot of them, and it'd be an enormous pleasure to kick your ass. However, I love that. I love that speech.
Why wasn't it the Enterprise?
That is the question.
Seemed like a slam dunk to me.
Yeah.
And they said the flagship, and I was like, not the Enterprise anymore then, eh? Maybe they retired it because they didn't want Picard anymore, and they got rid of it because he was associated with it. And he left in under a cloud, so maybe they got rid of it with him.
Yeah.
Distanced themselves from Picard, you know, the new Starfleet and all that.
Or maybe there's some sort of legal thing tied in with the films.
Yeah, maybe.
I think they've got all the rights back now under one house, but I guess we'll see. So anyway, what other positives did we enjoy about the show rather than staying negative?
Yeah.
Scott?
So I think for me it was all about the relationships, and I just think they nailed that completely. And you know, if you go back to the original, if you go back to the Next Generation, then that's the thing that they nailed perfectly. And they did really good stories, but it was all about the interactions between the characters. And that's why, to me, this felt like Star Trek, because it felt like they completely nailed that. And the story was great. I really enjoyed it. And you know, there's some things that there's lots of things I feel about it that I think are really positive. There's some things about it that I think they could have probably done better. And we've talked about a few of those things, but to me, those are really secondary to the fact that they did a new Star Trek show and they pulled it off. And it, you know, the key was the relationships in it, and to me they just completely nailed that in a way that they've not done since, you know, when Patrick Stewart was in it previously. And I think so. To quote, this is something I don't think I've ever quoted before, but to quote Futurama. So Futurama did an episode about the Next Generation, and it was obviously, being Futurama, it was very jokey, and they had, you know, the Next Generation actors, like Patrick Stewart was in it, but they were like the heads in the jars that they have. Yeah. But there's a line that Fry says towards the end of the episode that just completely resonated for me, because, you know, as a teenager watching Next Generation, it was just something that spoke to me beyond the quality of what the show was, even though it was a brilliant show. And it's something that the line that Fry says, and I'm paraphrasing because this isn't going to be an exact quote, but the line that Fry says in Futurama is basically, at a time when I felt I didn't have any friends, this show made me feel like I did. And to me, that was kind of one of the reasons I really latched onto the Next Generation, and Star Trek is always going to be, you know, my show and my thing. And this, you know, this whole Picard season came at a time when, you know, my life has obviously moved on a lot, but a time when I was coming to terms with ideas of mortality and getting older and things like that. And this was a show that dealt with exactly those things. And it was about, at its heart, it was about an old person coming to terms with the fact that they were old and then rediscovering themselves again. And I think, plot aside, that it was a show that spoke to me for that reason. And it was for me personally, it was just perfect timing, and I just absolutely loved it.
I think you'd almost. Well, I mean, I do plan to watch the whole thing again, but what I'd love to do before I do that is to watch the first episode and then watch the last episode. Not watch any of the others, just watch the first episode, because I think because I've been watching it week on, week after week, even though I've seen the progression, I think watching that first episode and watching that last episode, I think the progression that he's made is like vast. Mm-hmm. Even the way he carries himself, even the way he moves, and I think in that last episode, what I loved was he's partly because obviously, yes, he is a starship. Yes, he was a starship captain. Yes, he was a diplomat. But also, there was a reckless side to him because there's that whole episode with Q where he gets stabbed through the heart.
Yeah.
And you've got the Picard maneuver and all that sort of stuff. So he's got that reckless side to him as well. And what I loved was the fact that he was able to pilot Rios' ship because he'd been watching him. Mm-hmm. But yet we had a few episodes before that, we had him sitting down in the chair and going, I have no idea what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And then when everything, his shit's on the line and he's back in the ship in the same situation, he's like, right, let's see if I can remember what I've been watching. And he's kind of literally said to himself, right, I don't know what that guy's doing, but I need to watch him now because I want to know. And then it was that last episode was a culmination of everything, and that last episode was basically telling you this is now what Captain Jean-Luc Picard would be like if he was older. Mm-hmm. Whereas when we first meet him, we're like, we don't know who this guy is because he's not the Picard that we know. Mm-hmm. But here he is. The only difference is he's now older. That's it. Because he's still being the diplomat. He's still putting himself in harm's way. He literally puts himself in the middle of two fleets. Thinking on his feet. It was, his transformation through this show was just, glorious and not what I was expecting. It just wasn't what I was expecting. And it crept up on me. And even the whole bit, Steve, that you were saying where he kind of runs up the stairs and he can't get up the stairs and whatever. That's not to say by the end he'd be able to sprint upstairs, but even that I thought played in to that kind of I'm just older now and I can't do it all, and even that felt a little bit Clark Kent-y compared to where he's at the end. Mm-hmm. He even carries himself differently by the end. He's far more stoopy at the beginning, I thought it was brilliant, and I genuinely think there was so much showing and not telling in the show. I thought it was absolutely brilliant. And before I hand the mic over to someone else because I'm rambling, one of the things I really did like was going back to the plot. Even before we knew what the threat was, and in many ways, it's that thing sometimes where you've got a threat, and sometimes when you actually see the threat, it's like the Wizard of Oz when you've gone behind the curtain. So, but what I loved was when, is it Commodore O?
Yeah.
Yeah. When she does the mind meld with Dr. Girardi, and we just see images, flashes, but it is so awful what she experiences that she kills like effectively the love of her life because it's that bad. What's coming is that bad, and that was that I thought was really well done. And her slow descent into effectively madness / breakdown, I thought was done really well. And it wasn't that which you see in countless shows where someone kind of has to do an evil thing they just do it and then get on with it. Whereas actually she did this horrible thing and it just destroyed her from the inside out.
Yeah. I think for me, some of my favourite moments were some of the very small things in the show. So things like when Picard is on the Romulan planet where they're all refugees, and he walks up to that cafe that says no humans or Romulans only, and he throws off the sign and then walks in and sits down and orders tea, and he's like, waiter, I'd like some tea, please, waiter. And he knows by doing that he's going to cause a scene, he's going to cause a fuss, and there's going to be repercussions, and something's going to happen. So it's like he's poking the bear on purpose. And that's that thing, as you said, he's sometimes a bit of a rule breaker. He's doing it because he wants to get a reaction and he wants to see what happens. And just little things like that. And he's leaning on his friends when he needs to, but equally he's doing a lot of stuff by himself when he can. And Elnor and I just love that kind of father-son relationship almost between the two of them. And like I said, he doesn't like children. Captain Picard doesn't like children. He's like, well, I don't mind them. And had that Captain Picard Day banner, which goes back to that Next Generation episode, where he has to go through the ship with 3 children, I believe, on Captain Picard Day. And he takes the pips off his collar and gives them to them. And all these things, so many things that tie back to the show. You can see that it's made by somebody who knows their stuff. And because this was weekly, as you said, you couldn't just binge them all. What I found I was doing is I rewatched every episode in the week between, but also I was going back and rewatching a lot of the Borg episodes from Voyager to get more of 7 of 9. So there's things like when she, where she came from, and I watched episodes like we find out her parents used to study the Borg for years and follow them around, and I'd forgotten about that. And we know that she was assimilated as a child, but there's lots of bits and pieces that I just kind of slipped my mind. So it was nice to go back and see her there and see how kind of very stiff and formal she was as 7. And then 20 years on, she's been living longer as a human now and as an individual than she had been as a drone. And you can see the difference in Jerry Ryan's performance, because some of it's still there, but equally she's evolved and she's changed. And as soon as they said these kind of rebels, I thought, I bet you she's one of them. I bet you she is. And I was like, yeah, that was right. Just because that's the kind of person she would be. She wouldn't want to stay by the rules and stuff. So you can see that it's made by people who love the Next Generation, but equally the other canon from the other shows, whether it's Next Gen, Voyager, or DS9.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's start to draw things to a close, I reckon.
Okay. So any final thoughts then?
I want to say really quickly, as the music guy, I thought which is on the soundtracks on Spotify, I want to say the most times now when I watch a show on Netflix or Amazon, I skip the intro once I've seen the intro a couple of times.
Yeah.
I've never ever skipped the Picard intro, because the musical score for that theme is just sublime. I just love it. I just love that theme. And what I also loved about the music in the show was the way they used little nods to Voyager and Next Gen. There were just little musical kind of callbacks with the themes and stuff like that.
Being a light as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's a callback in the main theme tune to that episode.
Oh yes, yeah. You can go and someone told me about that and sent me a YouTube link, and I went and watched it. And I was like, wow.
Yeah, it's incredible.
If nothing else, if that doesn't tell you the amount of, whether or not you like the show, if that doesn't tell you the amount of detail this crew have gone to put the show together, it's that.
Did you know about this, Scott?
No.
So obviously in the episode The Inner Light, he plays a flute. It looks like a tin whistle, but it's not. It's a kind of a flute. In the episode, when Picard's son, Bataille, doesn't want to do what he's supposed to be doing, he's playing a tune in the background, and part of the notes that Bataille is playing have been folded into the main theme tune for Star Trek Picard.
Wow, that's really cool.
You go back and you go, I can hear it now, but it's there. It's there.
Cool.
So, Scott, your final thoughts?
I absolutely loved it. From the moment that it was announced, I was hoping for the best, but I feared the worst. But fortunately, what I got was basically the best it could have possibly been, I think, and I loved it.
Yeah, likewise.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. As we said, we talked to certain issues, but in general, I was really happy with it. I was really satisfied, and it's something that I will now watch again as a whole because we've seen. Now we don't have to wait week to week. We know that there's going to be a second season. I'm looking forward to seeing where it will go. We know that Whoopi Goldberg is going to be appearing in it as Guinan. So my hope is it will open the door to a different kind of story, maybe one featuring the Klingons, in which case there would be a legitimate reason for Worf to reappear. So I think if they do it and they do it in a sensible and logical reason, they don't just go, oh look, Worf just appeared for no particular reason. We just happened to be passing this planet and there he was. Oh look, if they do it in a sensible way, I'd be happy to see other people reappear, but not just because they think they should crowbar them in there,
Yeah, I think my thing is if they've got the same creative team who worked on this season work on the second season, I can quite happily sit back and wait for it to roll around. I'm not even going to worry because of the way they handled the use of, the cameos. I think the way they used them was so. They used them with such a light touch that I'm just excited about it rather than concerned as I was about this season.
Yeah. Well, we had no idea what it was going to be. It was a bit more worrying for sure.
Yeah.
Cool.
Right.
So, have you seen Star Trek Picard? If so, get in touch with us and let us know. You can email us grouchygeeks@gmail.com. You can come onto the Facebook group. Don't forget to go onto geeksyndicate.co.uk to support the podcast there and all the other podcasts. Leave us an iTunes review. And that's it. Barry, thanks for coming on this episode.
Anytime, lads.
Scott, well then, we'll talk again next month. But in the meantime, it's good night for me.
And it's good night from him.
Good night.
And it's good night to the both of them.